Welcome to our webinar, Opcenter APS, formerly Preactor, Tips, Tricks, and Pointers. Today, we're lucky enough to have Greg Miller presenting for us, and if you've been around LSI long enough, you've probably worked with Greg. Greg's been with our company for about 6 years. He's currently our Configuration Services Manager. He spent 24 years in the fiber optic cabling industry in production and quality engineering, but he spent 6 years in scheduling and 14 years after that as a planning and scheduling manager before coming on with LSI. So he is well prepared to understand where you as schedulers, planners, engineers, production managers, he knows where you've been, where you're at. And he also knows it from the implementation side for Opcenter APS. So he's going to be presenting for us today. We're going to have 1 hour, and it's going to be a lot to fit in 1 hour, but we're going to try to stop every 10 minutes or so to allow you all to have some questions answered. If you will notice on your screen, you'll see a Q&A section. I'm going to be watching that. And so when we stop every so often, we'll try to answer your questions as best as possible. So really that's all I have. Greg, if you're ready, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you go.
All right, Chris. Thanks for the glowing introduction. I hope I live up to it. I'm trying to share my screen here. All right, so we'll get Opcenter open. If any of you haven't been notified, Preactor has now been rebranded as Opcenter, Opcenter Scheduling and APS. I will get us rolling here. As Chris mentioned, we'll go through each of the categories or topics we had on the brochure for the webinar, and take breaks and questions as needed. Chris is going to kind of keep us under control and on the path we need to be on. It's our fixed time warning for this demonstration model. You see a updated splash page for Opcenter Preactor. All right, and if any of you have not seen the latest version, 18.1, you do notice there's a big difference in the initial coloring and formatting scheme of the model. Won't spend a lot of time on that, but what I will do is we'll get moving on the first topic of when orders must be expedited. I know each of your businesses probably at some point in time, the scheduler has been told a specific order must be expedited regardless of impact. Make it happen. And that's why most schedulers are considered heroes within their organization, because they figure out ways to make that happen. Within Preactor,
hey, Greg, I'm sorry to jump in here. We had one attendee say that your audio is very broken up.
Oh no, that's not good. Let me check one thing here. Are we any better now?
Give it just a second here. Okay, I think you're good to go.
We're okay.
Thank you, Greg.
All right. Thanks for the feedback. I'd hate for everyone to have that issue. On expediting orders, luckily Opcenter gives you multiple ways of doing that depending on your configuration of Opcenter and Preactor. But we'll go through some of the basic ones, and hopefully there'll be something valuable you get out of the options here. You can see I have a small set of orders in this model. What I'm going to do is go ahead and get all the orders on the Gantt chart. Before I jump too far into expediting orders, a lot of you are probably looking at the icons at the top and asking yourself, what is that compared to what you've traditionally seen in Preactor? This is the updated version icons. I won't lie, most of us in the consultant side are not a big fan of this update. I will tell you that one of my co-workers, Fraser Bonnet, spent a lot of work on building a workspace file that will allow us to get back to a more recognizable version. All right, so those of you that use Workspaces and toggle between different workspaces, you should be familiar with that. If not, we can take those questions. So I've got everything scheduled here, and the order I want to target is this M001 order. If I hold my Alt key and click of the mouse, I can highlight that order. Now see one thing I want to do here. And I want to see the operations on top of my calendars. Thought I had corrected that. I apologize. So I'm going to target this order M001 as an order I want to expedite. The first example of expediting is if you have all of your orders off the Gantt chart and you know you want to expedite that one. There's a couple options here. You can right click. If I select the order correctly, you can right click and place that order on the planning board. Simple as that. If there's specific places you would like to put the operations, you can drag and drop directly from the unscheduled operations window. You can also use your operation properties profile to highlight that order. And once the order is highlighted, the next thing you do, that's the only order that is impacted. To get that order on board, and you see you have the connectors between the operations because we have it highlighted here in the operations profile. So I'll cancel our highlights. So once the order is on the board that you want to expedite, you can obviously then schedule the rest of your orders. You can also want to take that off and reschedule, paying attention to that one order. See, we didn't do anything to force that order to be expedited to the front of the schedule. On subsequent sequencing, what we can do is drag directly here on the Gantt chart. So you can do that operation by operation. So that could be useful. There could be situations where you need to do that to level out resources or take care of a bottleneck situation, maybe. I want to point out that if I repair the schedule after making that manual change, and I allow sequence change, my drag and drop didn't change on that operation, but it didn't, with standard functionality, pull the other operations forward either. What I can do is just blindly, okay, I know I want everything in the front here. For that order. Now if I repair and allow sequence change, corrects anything that I may have messed up with my drag and drop, but it does get us in the priority that we wanted for that order. Excuse me. Another thing we could do, I'm going to unschedule and reschedule again. I do want to point out that I have my sequencing direction set to forwards and currently by due date. If I take this order I want to expedite, I'll point out in my data set everything has the same due date of 1/15. So if I change my due date on that order to something earlier, for that order. You notice I messed up my overview window. I hit that tab there. Let me close some of these panes. One second. All right. So now that I've changed my due date on the order I want to expedite and reschedule with forward sequence by due date, I get the same result. Also, if I take that order, let's make everything equal again and change our due date back to the 15th. Notice in my priority column, I have some random priority setting in this data set. Let's say I want this order to be my #1 priority. And that flows down through the child operations. Now, I'm still going to forward sequence, but now I'm going to choose my priority order. Sequence again and get the same result. And in our operation properties profile, this is what we're showing here is the order number, the part number, and the priority setting on the operation.
All right. Yeah, I was going to kind of just ask, does anybody have any questions at this point? We've kind of gone almost 10 minutes here, so I want to make sure that haven't lost anybody yet. If you have any questions, you can submit those through the Q&A window. If not, we'll go ahead and move forward. And Greg, I don't see anything in there yet.
Even any feedback, am I moving too quickly? Just let me know if I am.
All right, we're good to go.
All right. So we'll move on to the next topic of what happens when machines go down. I want to refresh everyone, most of you are probably familiar, but you have the ability to change your mode in your Gantt chart from operation mode to calendar edit mode, and vice versa. So with the operation edit mode, which is the default when you open this sequencer and overview window, when you hover over an operation, you see information about the order of the operation. With the calendar edit mode, now we see information about the calendar settings. And it looks like we've got an on shift going on here. If I hover over a downtime in my calendar, it looks like we're working with a calendar template, working day, which really doesn't tell me the state of this in this particular model, but we'll see that here in a moment. I'm going to use this Metalworker 2 resource as my example. I'm going to go to my primary calendars, Metalworker 2, and for the 12th, we're not going to make a big change here. But we're going to say from 10 a.m. to, oh, I didn't get clicked in there. It's 4:30. We are going to have some planned maintenance going on that resource. And that needs to be PM. All right. So now when I transition back to my overview window, I can see with my calendar edit mode on, there's the calendar exception that I just entered, taking this resource from available to make product to downtime. Now, this is a simple example, but there's a couple things that go along with this that I want to share that you may or may not be aware of. The Gantt chart automatically spanned this operation across that downtime. So the run rate didn't change, but the start and end time completion did change, because during this downtime, we're not going to be making any product. We have some options here. You may, if this is a certain type of resource, a metal worker probably can stop at the beginning of that downtime and pick the work back up on the other side if needed. If this were an extrusion machine, maybe that's not possible. So there are settings in Preactor to help with that. Before I make that change, let's go ahead and repair since I entered the downtime. Did not change anything around my calendar entry. If I change my maximum operation span increase from infinite to 0, now I repair, watch A101. This tells Preactor that we cannot span that operation. It has to be able to start and finish without crossing over any downtime. And that doesn't have to be infinite or 0. It can be a percentage in that field. This is a simple example to show you the functionality there. So there's the big point I wanted to make is you can configure that span increase to how your resources operate. If I come back to the Gantt chart and change back to calendar edit mode, and let's say we've got a message from maintenance, there was a problem. Now we're going to be another 24 hours from our expected starting back to production to when we're really going to be able to start back. So now we really push some orders out. If I repair now, get a few changes. The biggest thing I see here is we've got a lot of capacity on Metalworker 1 not being used. What I'm trying to show here is the difference between repairing and resequencing. If I take these orders off the board, and before I forget, I'm going to change back to sequence by due date, resequence. Now that I've resequenced, Preactor has evaluated and said, well, it makes more sense to load up the work on Metalworker 1 rather than keeping it on Metalworker 2 because of this downtime. So the moral of the story here is repair does not reevaluate best resource to utilize. All right.
All right, and we've got a few questions that have come in here, Greg. First one, it says, is this set up by order or resource? And that is in reference to the order that's not starting, that spans over the weekend. I was just asking, is that set up the downtime by order or by resource?
The example I just used is set up, the calendar is attached to the resource.
Okay.
And if that didn't answer your question, let us know, please. But yes, Preactor, typically the calendars would be associated with the resource rather than the order.
That's great. We got another here, and just asked Greg, can you repeat what you said about the repair not changing to another resource?
Sure. I'm going to undo. Another thing you need to be aware of, you can undo a number of times. Okay, so here's back to the point where I extended the downtime for an additional 24 hours. These orders were pushed out, and no work moved from metalworker 2 to metalworker 1. If I repair with allow sequence change, or any of the other two options, maintain sequence when possible, or preventing any sequence change, no operation changed from one resource to another. Repair does not do that. The only way to have the system automatically evaluate a different potential resource, a different valid resource, is to unschedule or unallocate your operations and reallocate, resequence them. So here's the result. All of the work after the downtime was transferred over to metalworker 1 because they could complete faster there. Repair will not do that for you.
Yeah, so the repair is really just tightening up all your gaps. It's not changing anything else, right?
Exactly.
All right. One other one here before we move on, Greg, and that is, if you mess up, how far back can you undo?
Good question. I'm going to right click. No, I'm not. I'm going to go to Tools, Options, Sequencer, no, Environment, General. Am I in the wrong place? Caught me off guard on this one. There it is, under Calendar. Tools, Options, under the Calendar, General. There's the max undo count. You can actually set the number of undos.
Very good.
Right.
Very good. Actually, we have one more, and then we'll move on. And that is, when you're putting different types of downtimes in, how can you tell the difference between, and I think what this is trying to say is, how can you tell the difference between one that's a planned maintenance or a machine being down? What are your options to be able to really see that on the Gantt chart?
Excellent question. I'll go back to the calendar edit mode. First and foremost, the tip display will tell you that this is a planned maintenance. But the good news is you have control over it. If we go to View Calendars, the calendar states table, it's one of the few, if not the only, table that is completely maintained inside the sequencer. All of the downtimes in this model are here in this table, and you have full control over how they behave between color, hatch style, if setup is allowed or not, and whether they have an efficiency setting, which they all have an efficiency setting, whether it's greater than 0 or not. So anything with a 0% efficiency is a true downtime. Nothing is being produced during that time. And this flag will tell you whether the schedule will tell the operations team to perform any setup functions across that downtime. Because sometimes when planned maintenance is happening, the machine has to be empty. Operators can't touch it while maintenance has it. Maybe completely locked out, tagged out, unavailable for any work whatsoever. Right? This is a way to control that behavior in the schedule. But on top of that, you can add your own list of downtime categories. So if you had specific ones for cleaning, for whatever you could dream up, you can add those here in this table and choose them the same way you saw me choose the planned maintenance a little while ago.
Excellent. Those are great questions. So keep those coming. It's working out well. So if there are no others right now, Greg, so let's go ahead and keep moving forward.
All right, before we leave this, I will throw this out there. If you enter a calendar exception and decide, well, maybe I don't need that anymore, you can come right back to where you entered it, right click on it, delete it, close your calendar, and now it's gone. And if we unschedule, reschedule, everything's right back to where we started. All right. Moving on to what happens when a PO gets delayed. Okay, we're moving up in a little bit in complexity here. So your environment in your schedules most likely has some integration with an ERP system or some place orders and purchase orders and bill of materials, all that information comes into your schedule. Chances are your supply dates on your purchase order lines are feeding into pre-actor from whatever ERP system you have. That's the most common thing happening. So what I'm about to demonstrate here is probably something that's happening automatic with your data, but I think it's good to go back through it and kind of a more step-by-step view here to know the possibility of manual control if you have changes you know about, but maybe the data in your ERP doesn't yet, or if you're seeing things happening in your schedule and your company's purchase order maintenance is maybe not as stable as it should be. We'll just put it that way. So what I want to start with here is we're talking material supply date. I'm going to turn off, go back to operation edit mode. Out here on the bottom here is our demand row. So we have sales orders that are due at this time frame, 113 and 114, and up here is our supply rows, tell us when raw materials are coming in and available for the schedule. And if I right click on one of those, I see different sales orders. The different sales orders that are happening are due, have a demand date of where these diamonds are sitting. So I'm going to choose this sales order 1 and go straight to the Material Explorer. Maybe I should peg materials. That's what I expected to see. So what we're seeing here, and those of you that use the Material Explorer regularly know this is another view that's been updated. So if I hover over, we see that we need 5 touring bikes to ship on this sales order line. So that demand is going to be supplied by A201. If I double click here, A201 requires saddles, tour frames, wheels, pedal assemblies. Well, good news, saddles coming from in-stock supply. Tour frames, wheels, and pedal assemblies are coming from other work orders. I'm gonna double click on A101 for demonstration. We need 20 tubes and they're coming on PO4. Okay, so that helps me a little bit. So maybe I want or maybe I've been told that purchase order line is going to be delayed, but maybe it hasn't been updated in my ERP system yet, but I want my schedule to be accurate today. So we'll go back to the overview window and let's make a point about that. On the 12th is when that PO4 is supposed to deliver currently. So my timeline with the 12th, I'm going to choose PO4 and I'm going to say, let's edit the record. Well, it's going to be delayed, but not extremely in my example. Say 6 p.m. same day, but I need the schedule to know that to get an accurate schedule out today. As soon as I do that, the first thing that happened is I have a new diamond here. And when I don't have multiple purchase order lines or supply records, it shows me the details for the only one that's there, the one I just modified. All right. So that hasn't changed my schedule at all. All I've done is change the supply date. So another example of using the repair schedule icon. If I maintain sequence if possible and take a look, I get movement here. This order, if I hold my Alt key and left click, I see this order is being supplied from that PO. So here's where my impact was. But I maintained sequence, everything else moved as well. If I cancel my highlight, repair with allow sequence to change, now I get a very different result. This A103 operation pulled forward, this pulled forward, and everything that these operations are supplying was able to pull forward with them as well. At least as far as their supply allowed.
Greg, we've got a question that's come through, and it's basically noting that when you are selecting a certain PO, you can see it gets kind of busy there, especially when you have multiple resources and multiple jobs. How can you isolate it to where you only see the one order that's being maybe affected by a PO as opposed to the whole spider web there?
If I right click on the operation, come on, it's not going to let me compress anymore to see this line, but the supply line is coming from here to here and feeding on through. and hopefully I'm answering the question right here. So if I go right click on this one we were working with, tell it to highlight just that order, I think I'm getting the view that's being asked.
I think that's right.
All right. The reason, let me turn the overview window on. The menu's in the way. There's some settings. Cancel my highlights. There's a setting here that says show highlighted operation relationships. And with that turned on, if I highlight an operation, so if I come to this final assembly out here, I'm basically seeing everything in that spider web effect you're talking about, because these are fully exploded bill of materials and routings, and they're shared materials across multiple work orders to get to a few different final assembly orders. So only this order is not showing related to most of these orders. So it's different, you know, your environment, your BOM and routing structure, you may see something totally different depending on how you're set up. So if I just hold my Alt key and click to highlight, this is the result I'm going to get because of this icon. If I turn this icon off, you don't get it. If I hit this icon, it just basically shows all relationships for everything. It's truly a spider web effect. Now, if I remove all my highlights and right click a specific order, highlight the entire order, now I get just the order I'm looking for and how it flows.
Greg, we've got another question here. What happens when you take a new order? How can you see the impact of taking a new order and what it does to the schedule?
That is something I'm going to cover it's one of the last, actually the last category that we're going to cover is doing an order inquiry. So not only just a new order, but a new potential order.
Very good. And that was the last question, and we've got about 25 minutes left. So if there's no more questions, we'll go ahead and keep moving forward.
Right. So the next thing we had on the agenda after POs getting delayed was a shop floor operator calls in. There's a couple things you can think of here. If your Opcenter pre-actor environment has secondary constraints for operator availability, I'm going to demonstrate that with this model. Let's say for a second it doesn't. There's no reason you couldn't jump right back into your calendar and add that same type of downtime, except maybe you have a no operator downtime to block out a shift that's not going to be covered. So whether you have the secondary constraints set up for your people or not, there's still ways of blocking out that time. In my experience, the challenge with that is setting up that process within your organization to get that communication to get to the scheduler. But what I'm going to demonstrate here is a situation where the schedule is being constrained by operator availability, and the data coming through either will change the availability of the operator, or at least a communication to the scheduler that says gives you a time window where you're going to have less operators or more operators available than others. So hopefully this will give a good demonstration here. I'm going to use our same example here of metalwork operators, which you can kind of imagine would affect metalworker 1 and 2, but maybe more. One way we can see that is here in the plot window that I've set up in the overview window. If I left click and drag across my plot, as I hit the time frame of the secondary constraint being utilized, I see the operations that are causing that utilization, that have the demand for that operator. So where I drop down to 1 here, now back to 2, I have two operations highlighted on down the line. So what I'm going to do, just for my clarity, I'm going to unschedule everything and reschedule to make sure we have a clean slate, as good as we can get. So I'm going to go to my secondary calendars, bottom tab here, my metalwork operator. On the 12th, I'm going to change my custom values for a time period. Say 7 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Probably not a common shift schedule, but let's go with it. Same scenario as we did with the primary calendars. I've entered an exception to my secondary calendar. Go back to my overview window, and now I have a flag here in my plot window that says my schedule is violating my constraint rule. Now, if I hover over here, it gives me a little more information. So right in here, these two operations are causing more operator demand than I actually have in that window. Same with these two. And here I'm okay, I drop down to 1. So how do we correct this violation of the constraint rule? Back to the repair icon. And I want to prevent any sequence change. I don't really want to change the order I make anything. I just want to know that I can't make as much as I could before. No change to my sequence of my schedule. I just had to spread things out a little further because I'm short on operator availability. Now, it might be a situation where you would allow a sequence change, but it probably isn't going to change anything because we have a standard 4 by due date sequence, and this is how it would have looked in the first place, I believe, if our constraint availability was the same. So no changes. So hopefully that is a quick and easy example to see where constraints can help you manage labor. Sometimes when we talk about whether it's labor or tooling or anything else, you kind of get down a rabbit hole. There are way more sophisticated ways of using Preactor to manage operator availability, skill sets, all sorts of things that are capable there. Those would probably take a much longer discussion than we have time for. With that being said, I'm going to show you, as I did before, how do we back out if we decide that change isn't needed. We're going to delete our calendar exception, our secondary calendar exception, and I'm going to resequence again. I think our time window may just work out. What I'm going to do here is close the schedule, and we'll talk about order inquiry. How do we know what we can do with a new order or potential new order? Now, to use order inquiry in Preactor, there are some requirements. The products table is important, obviously. We need to tell Preactor what the routing is for our items. So even if you don't currently have an order for an item, if you were to get a request from customer service, product management, whoever, says, how quickly can I make 100 of item X? Preactor needs to know what it takes to make item X, even if you don't have an order for it currently. And that's products table is part of that, which turns into a product bill of materials. For that routing in the products table, we need to know what materials are required for that item. Fully exploded, purchased items. This is important, and this is fairly new in recent releases of Preactor. This is a table we can import in all of your items, by items, with your set lead time, minimum reorder quantities, and reorder multiples. And the reason that's important is if you use Material Explorer much today, you know what a shortage is in Preactor. A shortage is something that you don't have any on-hand inventory and you don't have a purchase order. So Preactor, you have the ability to tell Preactor not to schedule any operations that have a shortage. So because Preactor doesn't know how quickly you could get that material in on a purchase order, but it doesn't suggest any purchase orders. This table helps with the order inquiry process to allow suggested purchase orders to be able to fully, more accurately schedule a potential order or a scenario order. So when the order inquiry is kicked off in Preactor, it will blow through the bill of material and routing, determine what materials are required, bounce that against your supply table. What do I have on hand? What do I have being delivered? And it will utilize those, and where it doesn't find enough material to satisfy your order inquiry, it will create suggested purchase orders to get to a available earliest start date based on your lead time, which turns into your supply date of that suggested purchase order. Also in orders, we will see when we do an order inquiry, any subcomponents. All we're going to put in on an order inquiry is the finished item, finished good item. It can be any level of your item structure, but in this example, we're going to use the finished good item and see Preactor blow through and build orders for any of your subcomponents. And when those orders are created, there will be order bill of material entries that we'll see here that will be multiplied by the order quantity that we enter to get to the full demand. All right, so let's go see if we can create one of those guys. And I think I'm going to have to close and reopen Preactor. Let's try this first. Go back to our classic icons. I had this happen once in preparing for this. Yes, it's going to give me problems. The terminator bar has lost my fixed time setting. We're going to start over here.
All right, and as we have just a little over 12 minutes left, if you're thinking of any other questions, it could have been something that you saw earlier or related to what Greg's talking about now, but go ahead and send those through the Q&A window, and we'll try to get to those here before we wrap up today.
A fixed time. I apologize, guys. This is a couple minutes we shouldn't have had to take. So I will get us moving here. All right. What I'm going to do one other thing I was going to show, but I'm going to skip over that, and I'll mention it if we have time at the end. Our order inquiry icon is here, or you have the ability to go to edit. I'm sorry, not edit. It's under tools, order inquiry. And we're going to give our scenario order or requested, how quick can you make this order? We're just going to give it a order number, fake order number. We're going to choose a finished good part number from our products table list. We can, but we don't have to specify a due date. We do not have to specify an earliest start date. I am going to say I want 100 of these. And this is a mountain bike that we're asking for. So 100 mountain bikes. How quick can we make them? Now, one thing I'll point out, when we do an order inquiry, if you have scheduled despite shortages turned on, Preactor is not going to blow through your routing and bill of material and build your subcomponents. You've told it you don't care about materials. So we want to make sure you're not ignoring shortages. So what very quickly just happened is Preactor blew through the bill of material, checked all materials, built any suggested orders, purchase orders needed, and came back and said, this finished good can complete on the 17th at 1:30 in the afternoon. Do we want to save this, want to confirm this or not, or we have the option to change it? I'm going to say yes. It did highlight for us here, but you can see if I highlight this entire order, that is a single order, so it's not connecting all the way back through with the subcomponents. What I like to do when looking at these is let's go right into the Material Explorer. So I don't have a sales order for it. This is a what if I had an order for 100 mountain bikes. Here's all the materials required. Here's a suggested order for a saddle, an existing purchase order, a suggested order for frames, an existing order for frames. So you notice it did use the 10 that we already had an order for. It says we need to create an order for 90 more. On down the line. Hang on one second. I can drill into any of these suggested orders all the way back. And that's actually in a suggested purchase order there for spokes. So that shows the depth Corrector will go to drill several levels back in your bill of material to come up with your material requirements to give you an actual predicted completion of a new order. And while I'm still showing a few things to the person that asked, how do we handle answering that question? Is this what you were looking for? And while we're waiting on that reply, I can do it without closing the sequencer. I'm going to jump back to data maintenance and look at our supply table. So by running that process, we ended up with 3 purchase order suggestions. And if I jump back, we've got saddle spokes and ball bearings. If I jump back to my purchase order table, saddle spokes and ball bearings, 1 day lead time, 2 day lead time, 1 day lead time. With this being on a fixed time model, this may not be. Yeah, so our fixed time was set to January 10th, so there's our 1 day and 2 day lead times to show that that is giving us the expected result. We already saw it in the orders file, but we'll look at it in the orders table here. Here, we entered this only. Corrector created all of these requirements to be able to make this. And onto the bill of material. So we created a bill of material for each of those new orders that we have to produce. The reason I wanted to leave the sequencer open look at these in the editor window, they're also tagged as a order inquiry. So if you wanted to delete that out and needed to find it in 1,000 records, you can do that. I'm going to give it a due date of the 12th. I need to do that on all of these. I should have done that when we created it. What I wanted to demonstrate here is that with an order inquiry order, they will operate the same as any other order. So let's say someone come to you and said, how quick can I make 100 mountain bikes? And I'm willing to potentially prioritize that over everything else in the plant. And I want to know the impact. So you can see my order inquiry subcomponents jumped really forward in the schedule. And my final assembly, or there it is, still ended up with we improved by 1 day. It's a small data set, but you can see my point is that you still have the opportunity to run scenarios and gauge how much priority you might want to put or be willing to absorb, and given a good lead time to make sure you win that potential order. That could be a competitive advantage. Chris, I'll let you take it and tell me if there's more questions we need to cover right quick here in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, and we're just at 4 minutes now, so we're going to try to keep this as close as possible, respect everyone's time. But we did have one other question just about the difference in the rules, scheduling rules with APS preferred, APS forwards, LSI preferred. What's the difference in some of those? And I know that's a pretty big question for less than 4 minutes.
I certainly can't cover all that in 5 minutes, but I will say when you talking about a preferred sequence rule, whether it's LSI preferred sequence, standard preferred sequence, minimize overall working process, minimize setup, all of that, then you're getting into an event-based rule versus a standard algorithmic rule. And then you're scheduling at an operational level rather than an order level. And what I mean by that is the standard rules we've been working with in this demonstration. Once this A102 order came up to be sequenced, every operation is going to be sequenced before any other order or operation will get sequenced. When you get to an event-based rule, you're dealing with operational level rule that will schedule your priorities operation by operation. Can be on setup times, can be on attributes that we build, bring into your data, and basically anytime you can get to an event-based rule, you have a lot better opportunity to be closing up any gaps in the schedule and being more efficient than with the standard due date or priority rule. So they are more complicated, they are harder to validate, test, implement, but they can provide real value. As far as getting into the technical details, we're going to need a longer discussion for that.
Yep, I figured so. So that maybe that can be our next webinar. We can kind of dig into some of the scheduling rules and different things, and certainly we do thank all of you for being on. We want to do things like this in the future. So after this call, we're going to be sending out a survey just to let us know what we can do better. If you like the event, if it's something you'd be interested in doing again, and maybe what topics we could cover. So definitely respond to that survey so we'll know. I realize that not all of you have 18.1 that you saw today. Not all of you have access to the material control, and some of you may not even have Opcenter APS. So feel free to let's strike up a conversation after this. We can answer any of those questions, get you an upgrade scheduled, or if you need further training, we have training dates on the calendar. Right now it's kind of tentative. We're looking at July and then October where we do actual live training that's 2 days. So we have different types of opportunities for you, but we certainly want to work with you, and we appreciate you being on today. And Greg, you did a fantastic job. You may be getting some follow-up questions after this.
I'll enjoy the follow-up questions, and I appreciate everyone's time. And for those of you projector experts out there, I apologize for this being so basic, but this is just step one of getting feedback and what future advanced webinars we might need to have.
Absolutely. Thank you, Greg, and thank all of you for being on with us today. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.